ultimately, I ended up having a car accident where I went off an embankment. And when I came down, I had an L1 burst fracture, broken spine, and a severe traumatic brain injury. I was essentially what it was almost like a life review, where I was reviewing um, my life and all the events that had happened to me, and the fear that I was consumed in was overwhelming.
Things there. You said that, I mean, you didn't have a mother because she had passed during childbirth.
No, that's what I was told. But at 14 years of age, she actually called me on the phone.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today, I have Michelle Ledbetter with us. She is a hospice nurse, so I'm really happy to talk to her about the work that she does. She's also had a near death or near death like experience. It's a spiritual experience, so we're going to dig into what that was like. But first of all, thank you so much, Michelle, for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Really appreciate it. I dig in and I love meeting new people that I haven't really seen much around. Like I haven't seen much of what your experience was or what's going on in your life, but I love meeting new people that way. And I try to go back before, I don't know when your this experience happened that may have shifted some things, but and I don't even know if you were already working in hospice at the time, but we'll get to that. What I wanted to know, if we can go back a little bit prior to that, it could be your teenage years, could be young adulthood. And if I just want to usually know if the feelings you have around this subject was any different back then, if that, what kind of person you were back then.
Yes, and actually, that's a really good question and a great place to start because it'll probably make sense as I move into what my experience was.
Sure.
So I don't have the traditional upbringing that most people do. I was raised by my father for the first 7 years of my life. And when I was around 6 years old, maybe five and a half, I remember noticing that other families had moms in their family. The person called a mom, and I didn't. And so I asked him about that. And I was told at the time that she had passed during childbirth. Didn't At 5 years old, you're not really sure what to do with that. It wasn't that big of a deal at that age. And then a year later, my dad found a mom for me, um, and in that, at that tender age of 7 and moving into a new family with new people, it was a bumpy transition just because I was just used to me and my father. But also, as we got involved with the family, I was molested by one of her family members. And so it really distorted my view of life. And although I didn't ponder on it a whole lot, you kind of push those things behind you and you don't, actually I'm just starting to speak about it because there's a lot of shame that goes with that. Uncovering it, I realize the gift that's in it. So hold on to that because I'm going to tell the hard story, but I can promise you it gets so much better. Um, After in that young family, my new mother was a Catholic, and so I was brought up in the Catholic background, and it just didn't make sense to me what they were saying versus how they were acting. And there was a whole lot of fear induced about who this God was. And so I had a very distorted view of God. I couldn't understand why God would allow something like this to happen. And I just didn't buy into it. So I was very anti religion. Um, Although I did move into the Baptist church and their same thing, I couldn't align with what they were saying because I had this history that was blocking me. And so that's kind of basically where it was a very tough upbringing. As a teenager, I became very rebellious. When I was 14, I came home from school and my father said, "Your mother's on the phone." So you can imagine at a tender age of 14, hormones flying, not even feeling like part of this family because they had a child together. So I was kind of like the outcast.
Mm.
Um, so this was a huge, like, well, what do you mean? And so anger started to come up and abandonment issues started to come up. And I became that teenager that was going to get out of all that. So I ran away. I didn't do good in school. I was the bad kid. And from an early age, I was exposed to Valium. My father was on Valium, and he, bless his heart, he is what people would consider a narcissist. He was very broken, very disconnected from his source, very verbally and physically abusive at times. And I get today that that was his corporate upbringing and his fears himself, just projecting those. But we'll get to that as well. So that's kind of it was a bumpy upbringing, and I married same month I turned 19 to a really beautiful soul. But the reasons I was marrying was to get out this
Mm.
environment that I was in. Of course, back in those days, you're first, you're so young and immature, but I thought for sure that I could make this work because this was such a good gentleman. And I was so excited about a life that I was going to develop outside of the abuse, trauma, and disconnect. Um, I stayed in that marriage for 18 years, but the wounded part of me surfaced as my children started to become dependent, independent little creatures.
Mm.
I no longer had validation in being that mom. And I started to struggle with my own demons from the past, not knowing that's what it was. I just felt like I had this kind of hole in my heart. Or I've heard somebody say I could never fill my love cup. It would fill
Hmm.
up and then it would go away. And I could not figure out what was that. I ended up leaving the marriage after 18 years and essentially was searching for this life that people say is out there. And I looked in every nook and cranny. I got into addiction. I did some amazing travel. I did marathons. I was just out there trying to figure out, I'm going to find this. Um, Now, back to the core issue, abandonment was my core issue. And unfortunately, not knowing, and I know I'm not alone in this, and trying to figure out who I was, my intention for all the seeking and what I was doing was also to let my children know that they could do and be anything they want. So that was my mindset.
Hmm.
But guess what? In their little minds, it was, why is mom leaving us? Why is she traveling without us? I ended up doing the same exact thing that I was my biggest wound to them inadvertently. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of my upbringing. I totally see I had to undo my image of what God was to actually know who God is.
Mm.
um, it is I looked at it as an entity and a judgment sort of thing, but now I see it as the life force energy that is all around us. I'm not giving you opportunity to ask questions, but there's so much to say. So my whole image of God is different, and we can talk about how I see that. And yeah, so that's kind of the
That kind
journey from
so,
very hard to totally enlightened, live in life to the best and totally connected to source and love, no longer seeking validation from other people. And I
wow.
believe it's available for everyone.
And no, I really appreciate you sharing all that. And some of that is, personal information that you went through in your life. So I can understand that. And obviously there's more that happened within that, uh, you know, changing your perspective around God and what it is and all these things. So we'll get it. We'll dig. That's the meat and potatoes, what we're about to dig into. But, going back to, I mean, just you mentioned a few things. I mean, quite a few things there. You said that, I mean, you didn't have a mother because she had passed during childbirth, which isn't really as common as it is. It's not as common now, but it does happen. It's a rare thing, but it's very sad when that happens. I don't know if that's actually what happened.
No,
Uh,
and that's what I was told. But at 14 years of age, she actually called me on the phone, and so that was where I
oh, I'm
really
sorry.
started.
I lost that part. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So she called me on the phone. So I had been, lied to essentially, and it just caused a lot of rift. I never did get to meet her, but I did get to speak to her on the phone. She was very sick when she called. So that really flipped me into a
Mm.
life is there's got to be more than this. This is so messed up, right? Like it's so
Okay.
messed up in my brain. So
I'm glad.
yeah, so that is where the abandonment issues and not feeling part of the family and being not being told the truth. And actually, my name, Candace Michelle Ledbetter, I didn't know I had a first name until I was in fourth grade because she named me that. And so I went to a new school and they called my name. And I was like, I don't know who you're
Wow.
talking about. So there was some deep seated
Yeah.
issues there about my own personal identity and my connection with anything outside of me, which I thought it was supposed to be to humans, um,
Mhm.
and this God that seemed kind of cruel.
So there's some definitely some deep rooted other issues as to why the abandonment happened, all that kind of stuff, and we don't need to dig into why that happened. But where I got confused, see, I and the audience probably was a step ahead of me in that is I thought your stepmother or this woman that was in your life as the mother figure had called, and you'd got angry about that, thinking that's not my mother. But actually, this is your
Wow.
actual mother calling at 14 years old, and you're saying, "What do you mean? She's not alive." And she is actually alive, and she wasn't in your life. So I can see why that would completely, take you off the rail, and so I can understand that and appreciate that. So you had that experience. You were married, had children of your own, and then divorced. Were you in that time? Because I did introduce you as someone who works in hospice. Were you working in nursing at that time? Were you doing anything else?
Yes.
Okay, so
I've been
that
a nurse for a little over 30 years and a hospice nurse for a little over 20.
Okay, so you were already working in that work
Mhm.
when the divorce happened?
I was doing some part time when the divorce happened. Yes.
Okay. So the divorce happens and you are still seeking
Hmm.
and you're going through all the different things that someone that does when a big life change like that happens, it's huge for a lot of people. Because some people, especially marrying at 19, you would have had that's who you would have always been. So separating after 18 years of marriage, you all of a sudden say, "Who am I?" And
Exactly.
that discovery starts to turn on. And so let's lead up to what happened, and how this all came about with the experience that you had, and maybe just give us a little understanding of what you were doing in your work at that time.
Yeah. So I was actually traveling as a hospice nurse. I had taken assignment in Colorado. That assignment ended prematurely. And so I had gone on to Montana to visit a friend for a couple of weeks, and my new assignment was going to be in Texas. There was a snowstorm coming. It was February 13th, 2019. And so I needed to get on the road to make it, and I wanted to outrun the storm. Ultimately, I ended up having a car accident where I went off an embankment. And when I came down, I had an L1 burst fracture, broken spine, and a severe traumatic brain injury. Um, when they found me, I had a profound sense of peace. I was able to engage with them. There was a time from the time I drove off the road to the time they found me. I don't know how much time went. I woke to the paramedics trying to pull me from the car. Um, and then it was kind of in and out, from there to the hospital. They realized they were going to have to do emergent surgery because I had some internal bleeding. They had to transfer me from that hospital to the trauma unit because they couldn't do the procedure there. And then it was during the actual surgery that I had this altered reality experience. And time is elusive. So I can't tell you in where this happened. I was in ICU for about 5 days. Um, and it all happens at once. So that 5 days is I can't account for it in reality, but there was a lot that was happening within me. What happened is I presented in a warehouse setting, and I was essentially what it was almost like a life review where I was reviewing um, my life and all the events that had happened to me, and the fear that I was consumed in was overwhelming. So it was an intense fear. The visions that I was seeing was visions of being abandoned, visions of reliving those events in my life where I had felt abandoned as a human and a soul in my molestation. I was reliving the events of trauma with my father. It was all whirling all at once, and it was an overwhelming sense of profound fear.
Mm.
There and there were different like scenes that came in. So one scene was where I felt the presence of my children. I turned to look for them, to follow me, and they shut the door of this warehouse and gave me a look like, we don't care about you. You screwed this up, kind of, you know, you know, up you, and,
Yeah.
and left. And I couldn't get out the door. And then that feeling of abandonment, like, and confusion, and what is happening? I don't understand what is happening. And another scene appeared, and there were quite a few scenes that appeared, but another scene appeared with an old a patient that I worked with that was HIV positive, and he was strapped to a bed, and it was just a lot of trauma and um, just feelings of overwhelming ickiness. Um, it flipped into me seeing the trauma of the people that actually I felt had hurt me. So I started to see their life review
Yeah.
um, in a way that their fears, their traumas, their things that had happened to them. I can't validate if this was true because both of these people have passed. But um, I saw life from their early years and the fear that they took away from their life experience. And again, I don't know how to explain it or articulate or put words to this, but the overpowering sense of fear was so overwhelming. Um, I just knew I was in hell. I was like, I'm in hell.
Mm.
And so kind of surrendering to that, I noticed a flicker of a light above me, and I looked up, and it was like tiles on the ceiling that started to lift. And because I was still in such a state of fear, I thought it was fire that was going to come in and burn me. And I bent over, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I have done so badly to be in hell, but please don't let that fire hurt if it's going to burn me. Let's like make it quick.
Mm.
But you can imagine, because it feels so very real, right? It's so very real. That whole thing ended. And because of my brain injury, they don't give sedative medication because they need to make sure that you're not, bleeding in the brain, that your neurocognitive stuff is coming back. And so I was actually fighting in the bed. I was trying to get out. And remember, I just had surgery. So they had to have a person sit with me to keep me safe because they couldn't sedate me.
Right.
And so I was acting out what I was feeling and seeing and reviewing in my head, trying to get out. I was trying to run. I
Wow.
wanted out of there. I remember opening my eyes and feeling like, okay, I'm back in reality. And I saw an African American lady sitting across from me. She explained to me that she was my sitter. But then it kind of got foggy again, and she shifted into a sister that I had met just a few times that was my biological mother's daughter, um, who actually passed a month later. But she was sitting there, and when I saw her, I thought, I can ask her for help. Like I wanted to get out of this hell. And so I just kept saying to this lady, please help me. I need you to help me. And thinking it was my sister, right? Like it was a family member, maybe I could get some help. Um, I can see why people think that the people that have had these things are just crazy. They've just
Right.
lost their mind, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because on this side of it, I knew what I was doing. I was trying to ask for help to get out of what I was going through. But on that side of it, who knows what it looked like, right?
Right.
Fighting to keep me in the bed. So it was it was just very icky. It was such an icky experience. When I came out of it and I was more aware, um, I I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want anybody to think I'd gone to hell. I didn't want people to think that I had something to hide or that sort of thing. So I held on to this for a long time. And after my accident, it took me still 2 years to unpack it. And I went deeper into the dark hole and the dark night of the soul. And I didn't want to look at what had happened over here. It had gotten to a point where I had lost my job. my best friend was dying of cancer, and I had $8 in my checking account. It was the lowest of low in this physical form that I could think I could get to. And so um, I had the gift of being with my best friend for 16 months until he passed away. And in that time, he really started to teach me how to connect to a source of God that wasn't what I thought it was. He showed me how to live each day to the fullest, knowing that he was passing. And so it was such a gift to spend that time with him. And that was probably the pivotal moment. And when he passed, I just was like, I surrender. Like, what was that experience trying to teach me?
Mm.
When I surrendered to that and I sat with myself, I had no money now, so I didn't have gas money to drive around. And I was having a hard time actually finding a job, because there's only, hospice was my thing. So there's only one other hospice in Georgia, and they didn't hire me when I went to apply for that job. And I had been terminated from the other one because I probably came back to work way too early, wasn't performing well. Um, I know I'm rambling. If you need to redirect me, please do. So after he passed, I did go through that passing with him, completely aware, totally engaged, so that I could experience it. Where before, like when my father had passed, I'd take Valium or numb it, don't look at it. I was still struggling with the whole death and dying, even though I was a hospice nurse. And I knew in my heart and soul, on a deep level, that there was more to this whole thing of death and dying, but I didn't know what it was. So before, I would do the same thing that a lot of people do and not really look at it, not be close to it, and was afraid of it. And I had gone through my near death experience, quote unquote. And so I was like, what's the worst thing? I can go back to hell. I've already been there. I survived it. So like, I wasn't afraid of death from that perspective, right? Not
Mm.
that I want to do that again, but I wasn't afraid from that perspective. And being with Brett and seeing the things that he was showing me and how to live life, and truly coming from a place of the heart, really, it started to make me look at life differently. I surrendered, and I just asked life and God to show me what that whole thing meant. And I liken God to the ocean and the waves, like God being the ocean.
Mhm.
I had heard this story, and I think it's beautiful. And we are the waves, the individual waves, but we're an extension of that life force energy, God. God is to human like water is to a fish. It's all encompassing.
Mhm.
It's the life force energy that is trying to guide us, but we often get in the way and try and do it our way. And that's what I had been doing my whole life, looking for love, trying to find it instead of surrendering. So
Mm.
when I surrendered to life and I started praying and I started just meditating, I started to get these little drop ins of what the experience was trying to show me. And basically, it was that in my life experience, which I believe that a lot of us we're born into this fear-based reality, and we are conditioned to believe certain things, that if you do it this way that you're going to have a good life, and you go to college and you get married, and so people pursue this route of trying to find happy, not understanding that the happy that they're seeking is within.
Mm.
And when I got that drop in to stop looking outside for validation, I recognized how much I was dependent on validation from people on the outside to validate who I was. But the message was to look within. And it took some time. Like, what does that mean? Look within. Like, what does that mean? But the longer I sat with it, the energy started to shift within me. And the best way I can describe it is when, we all have emotions. And I think our emotions are our God given gift to tell us where we are in the alignment with the source of love that we are. Because ultimately, that is exactly what we are. We are an extension of God, that life force energy, that love, that light. We are doing this thing called life. We develop the ego mind, the edging God out. We try, and that's conditioned into us. but we are all spiritual beings having a human experience. And the goal, I believe, for everyone is to get back to yourself and recognize who you truly are, that divine essence of God Himself. And through us, God is experiencing life and returning to that light. But I believe that all the contrast that anyone experiences um, is an opportunity to heal and grow. And I never would have looked at it like that before. I was very victim mentality. Why is life happening to me? So God says, look within and tell yourself, what was that about?
Hmm.
It was about recognizing that the fear that I had assumed as real was based on an upbringing of people that were doing a journey just like me. Um, and their mistakes could have been as my mistake of leaving the family, and my children felt abandoned, where I thought I was teaching them something by doing what I was doing. The abuse that my father did to me, I'm sure he was confident that that was the right thing to do, right? That was just the way you do it. um the abuse, I saw the person that had abused me in that vision had been abused as well. And if you had to put a hierarchy on it, much more severe than I had been. Um, but that what happened in this shift of being shown that we are all spiritual beings having a human experience, some people can this experience, and I think what you find a lot of times in the near death experience is it shows you we're supposed to come back to who we are, the love of who we are, and come from that place. But as conditioned human beings in this reality that we're in, we miss that, and we are so focused on outside stuff, looking for our happy and joy, and the whole time it's right here within you. And it's about releasing people. Truly, I thought love, honestly, and I'm a little embarrassed, but I don't think I'm alone, was an exchange. Like, I do for you, you do for me, unconditional love. You make me mad, then it's like, oh, I don't like you so much anymore, right?
Right.
Finding out that love is truly loving people where they are
Mm.
with all their blunders and hiccups, and seeing them as too an extension of God's source energy, that the magic just started to unfold. The fear went away and I moved into love. And even if I'm triggered now, um, because I was given all that time to learn how to meditate and process, I can flip something pretty quick and ask life, help me see this differently.
Right.
And I can do it usually within about 24 hours, so that I'm the one that was drowning, right? People that are holding stuff against whatever, life, politics, people, whatever, it's in them. And so that hurt and that angst is within them. Um, when people or myself before would bark out, it would be because I was trying to project that onto somebody else. And we've kind of got it all convoluted in that when somebody else is coming at you or doing that, they've just lost their alignment. They're
Mm.
so disconnected from their source, and they're trying to find some sort of comfort, even in the most dysfunctional things that they're doing. So it's like, oh, cut myself some slack, cut them some slack. Let's just start living life. So here we are. We're living life instead of me trying to push and drive it. I'm just letting life live me.
Wow.
Yeah,
First of all, thank you. Thank you. I always say thank you to everybody sharing the experience they had. Um, I would call that a near-death experience. I'm not sure, we discussed before we started taping that, whether or not it could be defined as a near-death experience. I would define that as a near-death experience. A lot of the same pieces of a near-death experience were in there in a different sense. But it was an internal battle you were going through as well, from what I'm gathering.
absolutely. It was my own internal hell. And I do believe that 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 hell is a state of mind. Um, I also believe that you can live a heavenly like life right here and right now. So yeah,
Well, and the
I
other
don't
thing,
believe there is a hell.
yeah,
I believe,
it
yeah,
kind of goes, and I've had a few discussions recently, and I'm going to get into some questions for you here, but I've had a few discussions recently with some people who've had NDEs, and I don't know how this makes sense to me. I'm still trying to make sense of it, but I'm starting to see the mind, when we talk about the mind, is something different than the brain, right? It's not, and I say that in the sense of people who come into this world with, say, memories of past lives or different things like that. Where's that coming from? Is there some kind of memory storage that's within our light body, within our spiritual body? And is that the mind? And meaning, so yes, your hell is within. And if you're kind of having this experience and you had all this negativity going on in your life or these things, this self, I don't want to say self sabotage because it was more of a victim type thing, but you were going through a lot and that can happen. You're kind of merging this experience with your mind or your memory, and then you have this experience. So I do believe that hell is something we create. That's just my own feeling. There are a lot of people out there that do believe God creates the hell for us, and that's I'm going to respect those people as well because they
sure.
have their feelings towards it. But the more people I talk to that have had experiences similar to yours leads me in this direction of it being kind of a self-inflicted wound as opposed to something where we've been thrown into this place. Now, I mean, because really at the end of the day, who's going to judge you more than yourself? We can do all these evil things in our life or these bad things that we know deep down are not good to do and we can try to ignore them, but there's a part of us that doesn't ignore it and it will catch up to you, and that's the way I look at it. So that is creating your own hell by doing those things.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And there was a lot of there's a lot of judgment around what people do in their life and from others, right? And that judgment comes from within another person. If you're judging somebody, it's your this is your you have your life experience and you're judging another person because they're reflecting something back to you. So when we see the alcoholic, when we see the person that has done these horrible things, we want to put them in a category of terrible people. These are broken people. These are broken people who have just lost their way. And the more judgment that goes against them, the more they, and I can only speak because of myself. You said self sabotage. Absolutely. I did not believe that I was worthy of love. And every single thing that I was looking at from other people, I was looking for the proof that that was right. They could have been doing a million things to prove that they did love me. But what I saw, because that was the belief hardcore in my subconscious, was that they didn't. So, not to forgive people for doing really hard things and terrible things to other people, but I think that we have a responsibility to, instead of chastising and criticizing and putting more of that negative, hateful energy onto somebody that's struggling, that we open ourselves to consider there's something bigger going on here. And we, as the outside, we can push somebody over the edge this direction, or we can allow space for a sacred space for them to look at their own wounds and battles. That narcissistic personality, all those things, those are protections and barriers that we put up to protect ourselves because of whatever we've experienced. So, with that being said, it's self-inflicted for sure. Hell is within us. But I also think as a collective, we need to look at how we can see the commonality of even those that we don't necessarily agree with that are hurting and
Mm-hmm.
are broken.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you said about you don't have to forgive. Forgiveness is a hard thing to do in this life. I think it's something we're all trying to master, and some of us are better at it than others. So it's not even necessarily about forgiveness, but to use your to I look at it where I say, let's send love and empathy that they will find their way. So that
Yeah,
way, you're not giving them a reason for why they're doing the things they're doing, but just send them something so that they can find their own way. Because within ourselves, that's what we're trying to do, right? So,
absolutely.
and that, I
And you're
mean,
right.
yeah.
Sending that energy of love is the key. That's the whole message that I got from this, is to move away from the fear and step into the love and light that we are.
One thing that was really interesting about your experience is near the end. I may have got it all mixed up, but near the
That's
end,
okay. I ramble and it's a
No,
lot.
no, not at all. But near the end of your experience, there was this light shattering of like the ceiling or tiles you said or something. There was something that was happening where you kind of like were in this bad place and you kind of noticed there was light coming through and you thought you were going to light on fire and you didn't, of course. And then it kind of transitioned you back into this reality, I think, is kind of what
Hmm.
I was
Hmm.
catching. A lot of what's interesting about that, and that's why I'm kind of putting it still in the near-death experience category, is that others who I've talked to have had these type of hellish experience, which actually are more rare than the other way, but they do
I just
happen.
heard a statistic because I'm learning too. Like I just
Mhm.
started speaking about this in October. 2%.
Yeah,
2%.
it's pretty low, and it's I mean that's a good thing for us all listening. Like
Yeah.
hopefully we don't have to deal with that, but it depends on when something happens to you and where you are at in your life, and it could be something that you need maybe for that specific soul or energy needs to go through this to expand and open up, but a lot of them will have this this, oh my gosh, I'm in this hellish experience, it's going to be forever, it's terrible, this is awful. And then the moment they surrender, as you said, they surrender to, they don't want to experience this. They're starting to kind of learn from it. There's this light that appears, and they go into this lighter space. And a lot of them will go on to this beautiful experience, and they'll come back to tell
Right.
that experience, and they have a kind of a hell and heaven experience. And what a benefit to that. Even though that sounds awful, none of us want to experience hell, but you get both sides to see, wow, what's going on here. The other thing I want to say, because I know my audience, I know the audience of people who listen to this type of messaging, and it's again, we need to get away from, I don't know if I'll ever be able to figure this out with humans, and maybe we'll never get there. I hope we will, to get rid of the division, the divisiveness of the way we work. And what happens is you'll have people who will say, no, hell is God, more of a religious aspect of it, that God has created this place that we go to and to suffer if we've done bad things. And I can actually understand the meaning behind that. I can understand the teachings of that. In that, if we bring in the spiritual side of it, okay, so we'll bring in the spiritual side for a second, and people who are more on that side will say, well, we are part of God. We are part of the ocean. We're the ripple effect, or we're that wave within the ocean, which means we are part of God. So we are creating the hell. So it actually, we're both saying the same thing, but saying it from a different place. The only problem is this one area really goes down the fear area. This area is like you have a little more control than you think.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's really about kind of trying to judge between those two areas. I don't know if you want to speak on that, but
Well,
yeah.
no, you're so right. I haven't really thought about that before, but that is so very true. I respect everyone who stands in their beliefs, if those beliefs are working for them. But there, in my experience, the whole religious aspect was very fearful. And the in what I was being shown in my life experience and what I was being told. And so, but you're right, it's the same exact message that hell is a place that you go when you do bad. Hell is a place where you are when you are misaligned with the God source of love and light and who you truly are. So it is exactly the same. Um, and I think more than anything, I if people could hear the message that's coming from the hardships, the darkness, the fear, the only other thing there is love. There's a variation of a lot of emotions, right, that are towards the fear, and there's variations of the emotions towards the light and love. But I believe we are meant to move into the light aspect of who we are. And I believe that everything that's happening right now is showing us the division that we're seeing is waking people up to say, what is this trying to teach me?
Hmm.
Just like my near death experience, when I woke up and said, what is this trying to teach me? More people are starting to ask that just based on what's happening in our world. And that is when people start to look within and find their light. And then you can live life from that place and it just kind of flows through you. You're no longer doing it up here. You're no longer fighting for your existence. You're no longer trying to make yourself right. You're truly living from a place of love that you are. And you're not searching for it. You are remembering it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I love how you brought it up. I've had nobody bring this up, but I like how you're bringing up the whole idea of what's going on. I mean, so many people have said we're in this age of enlightenment, this golden age, whatever it is, where you want to name it, these things, what that as a humankind is starting to go into this next period. And, you know, here I am talking to all these people who've had these individual near-death experiences. Well, if you were to take that and put it into a whole, it would feel that way. There's this division that you see people who are really good friends. It could be family members who you've always respected, and all of a sudden they're seeing something completely different than you're seeing, and now you're judging them, and we have self-judgment on each other, and
Yeah,
we're like,
yeah,
what is going on? And this is everywhere. This isn't just, this is
everywhere.
US, Canada, Europe, like anywhere you look, it's going on right now. And so why is that all happening so much right now? Why, like, you have to really, but a lot of people don't want to go that deep and think, but I think there's a big learning understanding that's happening as a whole, like as a human being that's coming online. So the way you just said that speaks to that. If I jump back for a second into your experience, here you are, and I always ask everybody this. We're talking, we're having this conversation. This experience you had, I mean, you said that you had in the accident, you had a traumatic brain injury. There's going to be skeptics listening to this who are going to think that what you experienced was just your brain firing random neurons and creating this experience you had, right? So,
Absolutely.
and I always kind of step back, and I'm always I'm the guy that's the skeptic, but I'm a very spiritual person, so I kind of lean that way, but I try to get both sides. How real did that experience feel in comparison to this experience we're having right now, just talking, as
Wait, more
opposed to it?
real? The reason I say more real is because I can recall it. So, like right now, I mean, I can recall it. It's still right there.
Hmm.
In 2 hours from now, I'm not going to remember our conversation piece
As
by piece
well,
and how we,
right?
right? So, in that aspect, it was very real. It was more real than just regular life because it's
Mm,
still with me. It's still very vivid in my mind. But the lessons are also there. So it's not like I'm so grateful for that experience. It was the catalyst that got me to turn around and look here, and help me get that connection with life force energy. And I love that you said people are afraid to go that deep. You're right. When I speak, some people they can't get it. They don't want to get it. That they're too afraid to go that deep. But honestly, Joe, I think it's going to take people being willing to go a little deeper because we're very surface right now. We're very surface in who we are being. Many people don't even know who authentically they are because they're trying to show up to be validated. We all want to feel loved. We all want to feel like our life mattered. But when we're looking for that love and validation from something outside of who we are, we're going to miss the mark every single time. Every single time. It's fleeting. It will come, but you will always have that hole in your love cup as well. It will
mm,
never fill up until you turn back. So, although people don't like to look at this, they think it's woo woo, they call it whatever. It's going to take people being willing to take a deep dive. And I think that all this fear that's coming up for people right now, you can only take so much. Just like in my, it was like, I can't take anymore.
hmm.
Before the light came, I was too afraid to look at the light, and I do believe it was life force energy getting ready to show me how to look at it different. But it took me 2 years to, unwind it. And then it came to me. Then the light came, and it's like, this is what all that meant. It just meant to look at it. You've been looking at it wrong. So moving out of what we are all collectively going through right now is going to take some willingness to sit and be with ourselves and ask those hard, tough questions. Who am I? What am I representing? What kind of energy am I carrying in this world right now? And there's only two. It's the negative energy of fear and darkness, uncertainty, or it's the knowing of love and light and that life is working for us and not against us. Where you sit is what you bring forth, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are having so much fear that it's a breaking point that they have to find the relief, and they're going to find it just like I did.
A lot of people have these NDEs, they go over to the other side, they have their experience, and they come back with this newfound ideology of what love is. They
Uh,
felt like God's love. They feel this. What was that? Yes, I love my children, but this was a million times bigger than that. And you try to explain that, to your own, you wouldn't explain that to your children, but you would, you have that insight that there's something bigger than we're actually being led to know. And with you, it doesn't feel like you had that. Yours was really based around the fear aspect of what you were going on. Did you, I guess a couple questions, did you ever feel a sense of love, or did that come online in the human experience just in the last, say, 5 years or so, or whenever this, I think it was 2019, you said it happened. So are you sensing that different energy that's come through you, what that you didn't really at one point recognize? Like you're like, oh, this is, and you,
I had
reason
no
I,
idea what it was. Yeah, I had no idea.
yeah, and I asked that because that means you didn't even have the near-death experience to experience that different feeling, and yet now you're feeling it in comparison to that experience that you had from altered state.
Yeah, I had no idea what true love is. And you spoke about forgiveness, how hard forgiveness is. And that's so very true. In our culture, we've been taught that forgiveness is something that is just really, really hard to do. But what I can tell you is the love that is true love, the unconditional love that I honestly don't think a lot of people understand what it is actually loving another person just for their presence in your life. Because
Hmm.
that presence, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, was a key pivotal point for you to become who you are. Whether you're going to do your free will down the path of the victim, or you're going to take those encounters of, say the hardship encounters as life lessons to help you grow and learn. What happens when you start to do this is you automatically love the people that hurt you because they have made you who you are today. I could not be this without the extreme contrast of what I went through. I don't think I would have seen how bright the light can be without the extreme darkness that I was exposed to. And so forgiveness naturally comes when you move into that heart space and see that that person too has to be a direct extension of the source that created it. In the big picture, God, life force energy, whatever you want to call that, that is guiding this thing called life. We think we're doing it, but there's a life force energy. There's God's involved in this whole thing. So forgiveness naturally comes because you can see that person with all the harm, with all the negative energy, with all the darkness, is also a life force energy. It was is an extension of the life force energy of God that is just doing their journey, and you can separate yourself from it. So you can see that that's their journey. Their what they did to me had a huge impact on who I am. But look at me.
Hmm.
Right? Thank you for that experience. And that's a real people have a real hard time with that because they
Yeah.
don't want to let go of the anger and the hatred and the darkness. But I'm telling you, if you can let go of that anger, hatred, and see them as they've got their journey, our paths crossed, the tapestry is woven by God, and it happened for a reason. Now, what is the reason? And can you choose to look at it from the eyes of love, or are you going to stay looking at it from the eyes of fear?
Mm. I love that. And the thing that comes to mind with me is so many individuals I've talked to that tell me this horrific close to death experience they have, whether it's a bad illness and they obviously got through it because they're talking to me, or there's something else that's happened, and they say, you know what, I am so blessed to have gone through that. And you go, a lot of people will sit back and say, wait, what? So we go into a victim mentality generally when you get an illness or whatnot, and you say, why me? Why do I have this? And I have so much compassion for people who go through things, and I've gone through little things. Everybody goes through things, but you hope that you never go through something major. And if you do, how do you look back at that and say, well, thank God that happened? Same thing with, thank God that person did this horrific thing to me. And, but you have to realize that every little instance we have along our journey shapes us to where we are at a certain time, unless we're no longer there. And in that instance, I mean, check out any of the people I've talked to. It seems like once we shed this body, we go to something that's even more beautiful. So, if we can get to a point where we can appreciate, forgive, love, which is really hard to do. Like I
It
totally get it.
is. It
Our
is. I get
everybody,
it too.
yeah,
I lived it. I lived it for
yeah.
53 years hard,
Mhm.
judging. Yeah, did it.
And like I like how you said it, within 20, I like how you were like within 24 hours I can usually, because we're human still. You're still human.
Oh,
So if
absolutely.
someone does something terrible to you, you're not going to be like, here's my love. You're going to be
Right.
like, you're
No,
going to do what you
right,
need to do at first. And
right,
then
right.
you step away though, and you don't let that fester within your body. I think that also, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but I think that can lead to illness and things like
Oh,
that once you
absolutely.
hold on to the,
Abs
you
yeah.
know.
Well, no, I'm a hospice nurse, right? And so
Mm,
I do see a lot of that. Um, I do see a lot of that energy that I think that people um, it's dark, it's a dense energy. And of course, you can't thrive in that. You can't
mhm,
thrive in that. I also do believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, it is, like I look at it as I closed my eyes to that old life that I was doing, that I think a lot of people are doing, just the regular grind of life. I opened my eyes to the real life, what it's really about. And when we pass on, we just extend on and open our eyes to a new realm. The energetic essence of who we are is who we are, if that makes sense. So that energy release of the soul when we part from our suit,
mhm,
um, the expansiveness of that, you lose the ego, and so there is no more hate, there is no more judgment, there is no, it's like ah oh got it. Right,
mhm.
it's
Yeah.
just a journey back to the source from which we came. But I believe that I have no idea what that's like. I didn't make it there. I didn't have the heavenly thing, but I'm living heaven now, if that makes sense. and
Hmm.
and I share this because I know it's possible. I had no clue that I could be this free of people's reactions to me, of life in general going on around me. I have absolutely no fear of death. And it's available to everyone, but it does, that real, this is going to be so hard, has to be lifted. And you have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to just put my foot in this woo woo stuff for a minute and just see. You can always come back to being where you are. Remember, all those fears, all that stuff is, we've been taught that. That's been
Hmm.
handed down. That's like generational, undoing the generations curses, if you will. And so it's like, are you going to be a cycle breaker and step out of that? It's different, and it can be lonely and you can be rejected. But when you get to this place, it's like, if you're rejecting me, that's about you, not about me, because I know who I am now.
Hmm.
Right, I know who I am, I know where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to BS anybody, I'm not trying to get you to like me. My message is my message, and if it resonates with you, which I think it will, if when people start to become so fearful that they have nothing else to do but to look within. um, and I hope I can be here to help people through that journey and let them know it's possible. It's absolutely possible.
Well, you being on a show like this helps with that. I mean, this is why we try to spread these messages, right? I was just thinking to myself, I can remember, I'm sure the audience maybe can think of this. There's different times in your life where you can think back and think to yourself, oh, I loved that time of my life. I felt so good. I felt so refreshed. I felt so alive. And maybe they're in this dark place now. With everything going on in the world, I think a lot of people keep getting caught up in this fear. And I guess the question I wanted to ask you is now more than any time, because everyone is in this cycle, what is something people can be doing daily to try to remove themselves from being caught up in that and get to this place of more of like a light place, some people will suggest just not watching the news ever, and that's just very difficult, because it's everywhere.
So for a long time I did turn off the TV. And I had actually done that before my NDE. I had turned off the television, but since then, and because of everything that's happening, there's a lot happening. The news is back on. I'm so not attached to the fear component. And I recognize that underneath all this chaos, if you will, um, it's an undoing of, things are being brought to light that are not working. Things are being brought to light. And it is that time of where things are being shown to people, where, of course, the majority are going to move into that fear and anger and hold on to their beliefs and try to be right. But it's, I look at like Asheville, where they had the hurricane that went all the way into the mountains, and those people that have been displaced, and horrific, right? Life force energy, that happened. But you, where you're looking is what you're going to find. So if you're looking at all the devastation and how terrible and it's awful and the money, and you can get so caught up in that, right? And that's where most people go.
Mm.
But right in that same place, you can look at the community that's coming together, the people that are starting to recognize the importance of communion with another soul, the people that are letting go of some of their beliefs that are keeping them separate from another human being so they can come together and live. Like they had to rebuild their homes, their communities. They had no water. So it's pulling people together. That's divine. And that's how I think this is going to unfold like that. It's going to be really hard, a hard hit. They took a terrible hard hit. But it's going to eventually, people are going to say, you know what? Okay, you don't see it the way I see it, but let me be open to just see how you see it. Because, being only on one side of something and not being willing to look at it from all perspectives, it's like putting an arm behind your back, but we stand strong in our beliefs. Like,
Mhm.
I'm right and you're wrong. If you could just open and say, let me see if I can see maybe where you're coming from, what's the ultimate end all goal here, um and stop the fighting and feuding and start to come, because we have to come together as a collective to make this all work. We're
Mhm.
just in the undoing part of it right now, and it's rattling people, it's shaking people up. So
Mhm.
what I would say to people is, first of all, focus on love, get to know what true love is, recognize your part in where you might not, you think you know what love is, but ultimately love yourself, because you have been given this opportunity, whatever it is that you believe. Adam and Eve, you signed up for it, whatever. You are here doing this journey called life, and it's an exciting time.
Mhm.
It's an exciting time. But where you're going to look to the left, or you're going to look to the right? Looking to the right of in the love part, right? And I'm not saying left, right, like politics. I'm
Right.
saying
Right.
where you choose to put your attention, you're going to get more of. And if you're really in the fear component and we're all going down and it's going to be terrible, and you're going to see more and more of that. That
Mhm.
is that self-fulfilling prophecy you were talking about. What you focus on expands, and that's what you're going to get. But they're in the same situation. There's a whole lot of love and light going on. You might have to look a little harder, but it's there. And if you focus on that, you get more of that. And this part, you just know you have the faith that a lot of religions talk about. Life's got this. I don't have to interfere. We're going
Mhm.
to, this is moving us to a higher vibration of who we are. I absolutely believe that. Is it
Mm.
going to be hard? Is it going to be really icky for a minute? You bet. But how are you going to choose to move through that?
Right.
Free will. You get to choose.
So seeing the light and everything, I love that. I actually I didn't know which way you're going to go with that, but I totally agree. And that's something that and you
Absolutely.
have to work on it for the first little while, and then I think it becomes a little more part of who you are. And then all of a sudden you'll start noticing you'll say something to someone and you'll think, wow, why did I say it like that? I guess that's a good thing. Like you almost find yourself in that place more. And so just
Mm-hmm.
being aware, that's why I always say awareness is key too. Don't lose
Oh,
your,
it's absolutely it's
yeah.
the most essential thing, because I can say, before I was doing life and I had no clue what I was doing. I
Hmm.
had no clue what I was truly doing. I was trying to find love. I was truly trying to find love and impress, and my life mattered, and doing the grind like so many people do. Um, but now I'm just living and
I
I'm
love
just
that.
watching it come to me, right? It's a beautiful place to be. And I want it for everyone. I just want it for everyone. And I think it is the time that people are going to start waking up to it. Absolutely. Looking in the direction of love all the time. Practice, but you get better.
Do you still do the hospice work now, or do you do any other kind of
Do.
work, or some people do different things now with, with insight that they get, whether they help people
Yeah.
or anything. Are you
So
mostly in that, or?
I am so I'm really new and coming out, right? So I'm learning as I go to like these indies. I've just since October, somebody reached out to me and he introduced me to the IANS group, which is the International Association of Near Death Studies.
Hmm.
And then I got an interview with them, and so the way that life is unfolding for me right now, I am definitely participating and sharing my message. I had to work through my stuff and be brave enough to take the criticism, and I had to find out who I was so that I could stand in this place. So I'm very new in greening
Hmm.
myself. Um,
Nice.
I'm doing this because I that's my calling, but so is hospice. I love my job. That is a it is a sacred place. It is a time when people really are taking off their social masks and getting real about what's happening. And to be able to bring somebody some comfort during that time and to let them know that this is not the end, and that as we can manifest and create our reality by where we choose to look in fear or love, I believe we can absolutely create in that dying process how that's going to be, what how that part of the journey is going to look for us. And we can go into it with the fear aspect of what most people do because that's what we've been taught, or I get the opportunity to share a different perspective with people as they're moving through that. And some people will receive it, some people won't. But I do believe that once they take that final exhale and the life force energy soul leaves that form, they get it. They get it. That is, so you get it, whether you get it during this lifetime in the physical form, which I recommend for everyone,
Right.
or you get it when you leave this vessel that is hosting us for this short
Yeah.
time.
Well, I love that. This has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate what you're doing in hospice and everything. It takes a certain person to be able to help with that. And I mean, I look at your life experience and I don't see why you wouldn't be the best person for it. So it's a beautiful thing that you're doing that. I always end each podcast episode with the same question. And it's a deep question, but some people it's a short answer, some people it's a really long answer. It's just whatever comes to you. But it's if you look at our collective human experience of who we are, what what is it that you believe is the main purpose as to why we come here and do what we're doing? Like if the afterlife has all these experience, like if it's the way it is, why would we come here and do this 3D experience?
I have pondered that, and what I believe at this point in my journey, and I have to preface that because remember now I've had a lot of changes in my beliefs, so
Mhm.
it's always evolving. I call it leveling up. I have a level up. Oh, I leveled up again. So, in this level of where I am, I believe that we all are an extension of that energy, God, life force energy, um, doing this thing called life so that God can experience itself, if that makes sense. I um I know that is a stretch, but I am one of those that things have to make sense to me. I'll give you a quick little like Jonah and the whale that never made any sense to me. I'm like, I just can't buy it. The guy's swallowed by a whale. And when I when I came through this and I started to actually look at the Bible, I wouldn't look at the Bible for a long time, but when I started looking at the Bible and I read the story, it was about him being consumed by fear. It wasn't about him being eaten by the whale. He was
Mhm.
so afraid to give the message to those people. And please, I'm not a Bible person, so don't I can't tell you exactly where it is or whatever, but when I read it, he was so afraid to deliver the message about turning to love instead of fear to these people that were going down the rabbit hole, so afraid that his hell was being swallowed by a fish, right?
Mhm.
Like that would be my hell too. My hell was what I believe I went through. But the that was a fear thing. So back to the question, what are we doing this all for? I think it's so that God can experience God can experience life, and we have to have the contrast in the whole, right? The yin and the yang for all of it to happen. um, I believe that we are just expanding. We're it's all an expansion. And I kind of think that maybe I signed up for some of this.
Mm,
I think I said I want to get to the highest place of love and light in that, down there on earth. So you take me through the ickiest muck so that
mhm.
I can actually find it. But that's just my own personal, I have nothing to back that up. That's just kind of what has come to me that makes sense for me in this moment.
No, I love that. And it's actually similar. I've heard this before. I get different answers for that question, and there are some overlapping areas that you said there. So I really appreciate it. I've appreciated, Michelle, having you on. This has been an amazing conversation. As I said, I hadn't known much about you. I don't do that very often on the show just because I like to see what comes to me. Otherwise, I feel like there's a bias that comes through where I'll think, oh, she's already been asked that question, and I just don't want any of that. So I'm like, I'm
No,
meeting you for
right.
the first time, and I get to learn about
Yeah.
someone's new soul, and I'm just like, this is great. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And it's, I, again, I don't consider myself it's still not like, I love it because it feels like I'm just having a conversation with a friend now. Right. So I'm not looking at the big picture, but, I know that I have room to improve on my presentation, but I get excited about it and I get lost and so,
no,
I welcome feedback from everyone. And I get, if somebody needs to say something that is ugly, I'm going to ask them, that's about you. Take a look at why you would give such harsh critical feedback, right?
mm,
um and it doesn't, I'm so happy I can actually say that, because before it would have eaten me alive. I wouldn't even have been on here because I would have been, oh no, I can't handle what people say.
yeah, yeah.
But I see it so different. I see it so different.
Well, I love that. And I'm in the same light, being a musician and turning into podcast, back to musician, back and forth. People are probably wondering what I'm doing, and the judgment's always there. But I go truly with what comes from the heart. And so that's kind of where I'm at with this. So it's probably what's speaking through you as well. And that's why we're both having this
Absolutely.
conversation. And I do,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And you said it earlier, like, we are our biggest judge and critic, right? What if we actually got to know who we are, and we really, in our judgment of ourselves, we're like, hey, I'm pretty doggone awesome.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
Like, I kind of got it going on. Like, when you make, and everyone's got it going on, but they just got to find it. And it's not a profanity. What am I trying to say? It's not a boastful thing. It's about just the truth. Like, the judgment I have about myself is the most important. Do I like who
Mhm.
I'm being? Am I being the best version of me? If the answer is no, then yeah, like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I love that. I just really do appreciate coming on and sharing all because there was some, detailed information you gave at the beginning of the conversation. So I do appreciate you being here. I hope that it does speak to some people. And in fact, I always turn to the audience and I say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to the Soul Inspired. If you think this video or this episode will speak to you or somebody else, well, if it speaks to you, listen to it a few times and take in what it has. But if it's going to speak to someone else, please share it. And I just appreciate having people like Michelle coming on and sharing their experiences with me. So thank you so much, Michelle, for coming on the show again.
thank you.
So